space, communication. These will be among the main topics for dialogue.
It was like bamboo was a sustainable timber for the future, and it wasn't just going to help us solve issues like climate change, but it was also just going to increase the quality of what it meant to live and speak to a new kind of design, like a biophilic design that really helps us get in touch with who we really are as humans.
Orin, good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It's been a while, yeah. We pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Last year, and then that last year just feels like a blur. And it's like, okay, pre-pandemic, maybe 6 months before the pandemic hit, I probably saw you at the Green School or something. But
it was, I think, at least 2019, if not 2018.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, here we are.
Here we are.
Good to catch up. And I think we first met, it was probably about 5 or maybe 6 years ago now, when you did a pretty inspiring talk up at Green School, and you touched on various things from the farm to the bamboo side, and we were at, within the cathedral of Green School.
Yeah, the heart of school.
Yeah, incredible. And you've since been making pretty amazing strides with Bamboo U.
Mm-hmm.
And here at Space Available, we're very interested in materials, and specifically materials that could help build a better future. Now, it doesn't seem to get much better than bamboo from what I've seen. Like, just give us some insights into your journey into bamboo, or how this has led you on to creating Bamboo U.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a pretty interesting, I guess it's a circuitous route. I started my journey really being interested in sustainability and really looking at, realizing that humans have a lot of a lot to change, let's put it that way. We've been so successful that, we've kind of created a whole list of new challenges for ourselves that we're going to have to figure out how to overcome in our generation, and in our children's generation. And I guess the amount of progress, for lack of a better word, that we have been kind of engaged in as a species, has led, our own success is going to be our downfall in a lot of ways. So I really started looking at, like, in my early 20s, really thinking what can I do as a human and as a person of privilege, what can I really do to make the world a better place, and how can I do that in a way that gets away from the fear and the guilt, and really focuses on things that are inspiring and things that really lift our hearts. I don't believe that we're going to save the world with fear and control and just sheerly out of the motivation for what will happen if we don't. I also think it's really important to do it because ultimately all of these tests we're facing, the waste issues, the climate change issue, the mass species extinction that's going on in the world, all of those things are really an opportunity for us to learn how to be better people, right? Not just physically. We're really good at being, physically competent. Humans have manipulated the earth to extremely incredible scales, but how do we really do it on a spiritual level, like internally? How do we make sure this makes us better people internally? And so when I came back to Bali in 2012, I looked at what my dad had started and what my sister is working on, and I got into landscaping just because I was young. I needed a job, needed something to do, and that quickly led into starting a farm. And I really wanted to create a platform for sustainability, and I was giving a talk about the Cool Farm, I guess, when I first met you, and that was really just about creating a place to bring people together to learn about sustainability and develop community and do small but meaningful acts that really speak to the things we can do to make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but also for future generations and for, you know, the whole planet's community of species and animals. And that, you know, it became really clear after a year or so that bamboo, we're really known for bamboo. I mean, Green School, and then my sisters work with Ibuku. There's just people knocking down the doors asking, how do we build with bamboo, you know? And I was like, you know, trying to differentiate myself a little bit at that time. But it became really clear that, like, I was the one who should be leading the courses because I was already doing permaculture design courses. We were doing herbal medicine courses, farming courses, biointensive gardening, experimenting with lots of different composting methods. And so we launched a bamboo course. And my dad was like, let's call it Bamboo U. So that's what we called it. And very quickly that turned into a whole series of courses, and then there was a team and a brand, and then all of a sudden we were running, like, you know, six courses a year, and bringing young designers and architects from all over the world to learn in a hands-on way how to design and build bamboo. You know, the current building industry has made it really easy for me in a lot of ways because they've totally segregated design from the act of making. And they've dehumanized what it means in a lot of ways to be a designer and architect. You know, most architects, in my opinion, are trained to be cyborgs by this point. You know, they spend all of their time in front of a computer. You know, and the computer is great. It can enable us, but it also ends up dictating a lot of things. And that, combined with our obsession with economic efficiency, has really stripped all of the beauty, all of the sustainability out of most buildings. So I wanted to create a platform, not just to learn about bamboo. And bamboo, you know, it's one of the most sustainable building materials in the world, especially in the tropics, but even in other parts of the world. Using bamboo instead of using industrial materials, you know, lowers your CO2 footprint. In some cases, it can even store carbon in structures. It leads to restoring degraded land. It helps rural communities. So we wanted to really make a place where people could learn about bamboo and have a lot of fun doing it. So we started Bamboo U, and that's been the beginning of a whole journey. And I'm just kind of blown away every day by how many people are interested. We had no idea when we started, like, how many people are out there that just really believed what we did, which was like bamboo was a sustainable timber for the future. And it wasn't just going to help us solve issues like climate change, but it was also just going to increase the quality of what it meant to live and speak to a new kind of design, like a biophilic design, that really helps us get in touch with who we really are as humans, and feel at home.
Incredible. But yeah, that you mentioned sort of inspiring first, and we see a lot today of people shaming and fearful and, you know, like just shouting a lot, which, you know, I understand there's some major issues that need fixing. But the way that you guys, you and your family seem to be doing things is definitely different. And speaking of being inspired, when I first came to Bali, probably about 8 years ago, or first moved to Bali, should I say, we went to Green School, and I met your dad, and I was just kind of like blown away. Like one of those rare moments in life when you see something every decade that really blows you away. When I went to the Green School, Green Village, you know, got the tour from your father, and it was just mind-bogglingly sort of magic, you know. It's kind of like this utopian village of the past, but also the future. There was farming there was the obviously education system, and all these different things that you guys are working on, recycling plastic and turning them into great design items and things like that. So very inspiring. And I was kind of wondering at the time, how do I learn more about this? And then obviously you popped up with Bamboo U, so I'm not surprised it's doing well. So what level of sort of education are you doing? And it's kind of like long courses, or people can just, you know, dip their toes in, and what sort of things do you do there?
I mean, right now, we're doing exclusively online things just because Bali's closed and our market is very much international. Most of our courses would have one or two people from, a variety of countries. So like we'd have 30 to 40 people join one program, 11 days long, and then there'd be like 25 different nations represented. So it was a little bit like the United Nations of bamboo, as well as, yeah. And that was also like, you'd have people from Sweden be like, yeah, I'm starting a bamboo business in Sweden. I'm like, okay, that's, I'm going to learn something myself here, because, but now we've taken it online, and it's called the online bamboo immersion, which is different from the in-person bamboo immersion, and it's actually about 12 weeks long. And we had to make it much more theoretical, but we invested a lot in making sure that we created the level of video content that really brought through the inspiration as much as possible. And it's actually now become like this kind of lead-in, because there's all these people that want to come to Bali but they can't. So we said, look, take our online course, and then we'll actually give you a big discount on the in-person course. So you basically get the online course for free once you come to Bali. And that's also helped a lot. So all the people that really want to come are getting a kind of a precursor. And I'm realizing now that it's actually in some ways been a big gift, because now I have all of the theoretical content online. So people can take all of the theory online, and then when they come to Bali, we just get to straight into building things. And we don't have to spend so much time on the lectures because everybody has a background already. All of the kind of commonly asked questions are kind of already been addressed. And we can really focus on what Bali has a gift for, which is this kind of freedom to create and build things that in a lot of places would either, I'd probably be, for building the structures we built here in Bali, in certain places I'd be incarcerated, it would just be deemed unsafe and irresponsible, unfortunately.
That's the beauty of Bali, right? You can do these things, and also the locals are incredibly gifted craftspeople who can, do for you and work with incredible people to work with, on that level.
Exactly, yeah. And the Balinese woodworkers really pivoted into bamboo construction as the bamboo industry took off in the early 2000s. So now there's a whole industry of bamboo builders, which is pretty incredible.
So let's say we do the course online, which is the theory aspect of it. Come to Bali, and you build physical structures, or
yeah. So every course, well, we do model making. We let people create their own designs. So if they want to make prototypes for like a piece of furniture, sculpture, maybe a model for a bigger building they're interested in doing, but we also actually build a full-scale structure. So we've built, I think, 15 different structures with bamboo students, and we've done some like small things that are just, like little pavilions, which in my opinion is actually the best because it's the most accessible. The most number of people can kind of work on a 1 to 2 story, 5 by 5 kind of scale, right? But we've also done some really large things, and we've prototyped things in the bamboo course that have actually gone on to be the foundation work for much larger structures. Like right now, the Green School just had their new gymnasium built. It's called the Green School Arc.
That's incredible. I just saw that online.
Designed by Ibuku. But the first structure that led to that was actually another structure I did for Bamboo U with the Bamboo U team, and it was heavily inspired by Jörg Stamm, and he concepted it, and then Jules, who was my Jules Delage, who was my Bamboo U program manager at the time, he was really inspired by it, and we actually created the Bamboo Hall, which is now our workshop, using this wild parametric technique that then turned into the kind of the basis for how we created the arc grid shell.
So it's a very kind of experimental exploration, and then you go, oh, that's a good idea, and then you kind of take that and build a real structure.
Yeah. We're big proponents. Well, I was like, how do I teach people about bamboo in the way that we learned? And we really learned by doing, right? And being in the real world and by pushing what we thought was possible. So I felt like it was only natural to create a course that actually engage people in that process of going to the edge of the envelope. So not just kind of teaching them what we already knew, but also inviting them into the innovation process and how we actually push what we think is possible.
Yeah, bamboo, it's very interesting. And one thing I found interesting when I first started studying is that it's actually grass.
It's a
huge
giant
piece of
grass.
Yeah, we're
It's
like
a
ants.
giant
We're like
grass.
ants, and that's like a piece of grass on your lawn or something. It's incredible.
That's why it grows so fast, right? And there's the saying, if you mow your lawn, it grows faster, right? If you want to keep your lawn healthy, you have to mow it, right? And in a lot of ways, bamboo's the same way. If you sustainably, you don't mow it down quite in the same way, but if you selectively harvest bamboo poles from a clump, you're actually increasing the health of clump, and you're creating space for new shoots to grow. So it actually becomes more productive than if you were just to leave it without doing anything to it. And you actually store more carbon if you harvest a bamboo clump, because all of that carbon would disintegrate in the forest and go back into the atmosphere. But if we turn it into a durable product, we can put 30 to 60 or even 100 years longer on that product. And theoretically, when you start to look at, circular economy theories and bio-based economies, that could be recycled into another product in the future, or that could be burned for biomass, which then you're offsetting the need for other types of carbon-intensive energy.
It's interesting.
Or even create biochar out of it, which would store it in the landscape for up to 1,000 years.
Yeah, because build like a circular economy or building up to a circular system is something we're very interested in here. And quite often you see things, structures or whatever it is, a design item, and it will usually be mixed with several different parts, hence why it can't be recycled. So even though some of those things, the materials might be not too bad, it's just impossible to recycle because you have to pick away at all these different parts that make up, let's say, a shoe. It's like, 40 different materials on one shoe. Like, how the hell are you going to recycle that? Who's got time to pick that apart? And then individually, it just end up getting landfilled. And what's quite interesting with bamboo, or certainly some of the projects I saw you guys doing, is you seem to be processing the bamboo in several different ways for different uses. So the floors might feel really flat like wood, or some of the walls might feel a certain different way, and it's all one material, but it looks like several different, it's almost 7 different materials, the way it's been processed and manufactured and built. And is that something which you sort of consciously do? You're like, okay, let's see how far we can take this one material. So end of life, I don't know how long bamboo structures last, but let's say end of life, pack it all down, and it's easily just to be recycled again, and then you're back into the system or whatever. And can you reuse all bamboo? Is that something you can do? Or
So it's interesting. There's a really great book about looking at bamboo in the circular economy called Booming Bamboo by a guy from the Netherlands named Pablo van der Lut, and he, really looks at the life cycle of a bamboo product. And I mean, we focus on bamboo as a round pole, which is actually not the industry norm. Most of the bamboo, at least the bamboo being exported, first of all, most bamboo is consumed in domestic markets. So the biggest consumers of bamboo are people around Asia and South America that are just using it for their daily needs, like they've been doing for hundreds or even thousands of years. But now it's entering into the international market, and it's becoming an alternative for industrial materials, right? And we started building with bamboo. My dad really drew a hard line in the very beginning, where he was like, I don't know if you've heard the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, all we had was bamboo. So everything was bamboo. And we learned what was really good out of bamboo, and what really made sense to make out of bamboo, and what kind of makes sense to use out of bamboo and is kind of nice, and then what really you shouldn't do out of bamboo in that process, right? And so now we're actually much more selective about where the bamboo's used for the longest term and the highest use of the material. But that being said, that's when you're using it in its raw form, right? So we use it as a round pole, and like you mentioned, we do turn it into splits, but it's very minimally processed, right? But most of the bamboo in the world, and the way that it's going to scale, at least right now, given our current level of technology, is with engineered bamboo products. So radially laminated bamboo, strand woven bamboo, bamboo floorboards, bamboo particle board, all of these things that are going to replace, because timber and wood demand is going up, using timber, if it's sustainably harvested, and bamboo, of course, in the built environment brings down the carbon footprint of any building huge amount. It's something like 40, I don't remember the exact number, but it's over 40% of all CO2 emissions are linked to our built environment, our buildings. About 11% is from the actual construction, and the rest is from using the building. So even that 11% is huge, and that's because we're using concrete and steel and aluminum and plastics as our main building materials. So bamboo is becoming a substitute for that, and they're finding really clever ways to turn it into all kinds of different durable planks. And it's actually, when you turn a bamboo pole into an engineered floorboard or an engineered beam or a wall panel, it's actually harder than any hardwood is. So it's actually being used not just because it's sustainable, but also because it performs better. And in many cases, it's the cost is competitive with hardwoods, right? So what happens is the glue is a big issue, right? You mentioned how it's separating those materials. So you really need to use, even if it's not biodegradable, we need to use non-toxic glues so that, but the basic system is, let's say you have a round pole, you can turn it into splits. Some of that has to be used for other industries because a bamboo pole is like a long tapering cone, and only a part of it is good for construction. The rest, in China, they've created this kind of coordinated effort where you've got paper, textiles, and biomass, and engineered products all operating together in kind of a synchronized way to make sure that it's cost effective, right? So every part of the bamboo is actually being used, right?
Oh, wow, so they're maximizing it across several different...
Yeah, they're maximizing it across different industries. And that's, I guess, the power of China. They have this, the government there has this ability to coordinate industries that in other parts of the world is a little bit harder, like here in Indonesia. So that's why we haven't gone the industrial route. We've really focused on the artistic side because that's the gift that we have in Bali. And but basically, the answer is, you make a chair, right? In theory, that chair it stores carbon for as long as it does, or the building stores carbon. And then when it's no longer in use, it either decomposes back into the ground, or you could, chop it all up and you could shred it and turn it into another product by sticking it back together. Or you could, turn it into biochar, right? And then it stays in the environment for a very long time. Or you could, you could burn it for electricity, right? And again, that's theoretical because you need to put all those other systems into place, right? But it's important that we start somewhere with how we do things. And at the very least, by building a bamboo structure, if you're going to build a structure, you're not building a concrete structure and you're not building a steel structure. So you're already offsetting the consumption of that material, right? Like even sand. Sand is the world's most abundant mineral. We're having, proxy wars, and we're destroying whole ecosystems just to mine sand. The mafia's involved. They're kicking people off their land just to mine sand in order to make an island somewhere, or in order to get enough aggregate to make a concrete structure. Because you can't use all sand. Like desert sand's out of the question. Only certain parts of the ocean, and it's becoming more and more expensive to get access to the quantities of sand that's needed in order to build the cities that we're building, because we're building cities at an extraordinary rate.
Wow. So bamboo then, it seems to have everything you need, right? It's cost effective. It's as hard, if not harder than lots of hardwood. I mean, you see in Hong Kong use the scaffolding, so that shows you how strong stuff is. And, it's obviously incredibly sustainable, and it grows very fast, and it renews itself and does a ton of things to the soil. So why do you not think it's more widely used than what it is in terms of, we all know that now. I'm sitting in a concrete house definitely not good for the environment. And I've learned a lot since those 10 years of bamboo and discovering other things. But on a mainstream level, it's just not quite there yet, and it just doesn't seem to be on a wider scale replacing wood yet. Like, what are the obstacles for that? What's stopping bamboo from going to those sort of scales?
So I think the main thing is actually the cost, right? Concrete is pretty heavily subsidized to start with. It's also, externalizing a huge amount of the cost by releasing huge amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. So we're not really accounting for it properly. So it's just not on a dollars and cents level. It's not quite as cost effective. And until governments start, giving incentives and not subsidizing fuel so much, if fuel costs what it's cost in the market here in Indonesia, concrete wouldn't be nearly as appealing as a building material, right? So that's one of the problems. Another problem is just knowledge and supply chain. Building an industrial supply chain, it's easy to get enough bamboo to build a few beautiful buildings in Bali, like what we do, because there's a lot of it in the mountain. But to get enough consistently to, go to IKEA, for example, and supply all of their stores that are currently, using wood products, to turn that over to bamboo requires a huge amount of coordination from the village level all the way to the manufacturing, and then all the way to supplying, right? And bamboo is extremely irregular, right? So one of the things about trees, which makes them so appealing, is you cut down one large tree, and it's this honking thing. You cut it up into squares, and there's very, very little waste, right? And then the waste you can use as pulp, and you're not thinking about having to harvest it sustainably. You just chop down the whole forest, right? So it's very, very, cheap. But then with bamboo, you need to train the people in the village, or the people in the village need to make sure that they harvest it, and it's much more labor intensive to get out of the ravine where it currently is. And then you've got to, chop it into the appropriate length, and you've got to quality control it, and you've got to find the poles that are straight enough to use, or you need to find somebody who's really crazy like us, who looks for curved poles in a certain direction to put in a certain part of the house, because we're crazy artists. But most of the industrialized supply chain just won't take those bamboos. There's only a few bamboos that are really good for industrial purposes, right? So that's why it hasn't taken off as an industrial material. And then you have to process it from a round, tapering, hollow cone. Is basically, you have to process that into a square. You've heard the term putting a square peg in a round hole, right? It's just it takes a lot of extra energy. So unless it's very intelligently designed, and I believe we'll get there, and we're going to have to get there. But that's causing a lot of barriers, and it's an interesting thing where we have tradition and innovation really coming together here, because it's very much a traditional product, but things like AI and automation and robotics will actually do a huge service to bringing bamboo into the industrial world, because it'll allow for much larger ranges of tolerance in what we can build with in an industrialized society. So, and I don't know exactly how that's going to unfold, but we can start to see people who are really interested in 3D fabrication get very interested in bamboo, because it creates this ultimate challenge where every pole is different. So, how can you get machines to take those poles and then actually do what the carpenters do so well?
Wow, that's incredible. The sort of traditional wisdom of bamboo meets the future AI robots that are looking for those weird poles and working out where to put them and designing them.
And it brings up some interesting philosophical points too, because okay, but the carpenters are already really good at it. Why do we need? And it's kind of like it's like if modern people, we think we have machines, so that's the tools we want to use, right? Traditional craftsmen had their hands and simple tools, and they actually adapted their actual skills to use those simple tools in ways that when we look at, we just go, why does that look so easy? And it's because they spent 5 years just with that knife, perfecting how they do that so that they can carve each fish mouth on site to fit the exact pole perfectly that specific fish mouth is going to reach, right? So I really hope that there's a place in the future for the kind of crazy artistic bamboo structures that we do. I think that the answer is often not one or the other, right? It's usually in our capacity to be able to hold both at the same time.
Yeah, I think today people are really waking up to, city life, thinking about the future, post-pandemic, what the world's going to look like. And specifically in fashion, I'm seeing there's like a race of all these fashion brands trying to find these next sustainable materials, and whether it's mycelium or various things. And I'm just wondering if that's happening in the building industry, and like has IKEA approached you or anything like that? Has anybody like reached out to you guys?
It's really interesting you bring this up, because I'm actually the official face of Kenzo perfumes.
I saw that.
Right? So you can see the fashion industry is waking up in a lot of ways. They're realizing that they need to adapt, and they need to speak to the world and to their consumers in ways that are relevant, right? And they made up a really powerful decision. Actually, they're used to running large PR campaigns where they find an actor or a model, somebody in that industry that's really recognizable, that they believe people look up to, and use them as their face for their brands. And they made a really interesting choice where they decided to pick somebody who's actually not very well known, and in a lot of ways quite ordinary, but express the values that they want to take their business to. And so they basically asked me to be their poster boy in exchange for helping bring people to take the Bamboo course, right? So they're giving they agreed to give 10 spots this year for people to come to Bali and take our Bamboo course. And we actually had 1,000 people take the scholarship form, and then down to that we've whittled it down to 20, and we've sent it to their team to decide who the last 10 will be, who will take our course. So that's really exciting.
It's incredible.
And I mean, for me, it's like, it's just interesting to see these things unfold, right? I didn't wake up one morning and be like, it would be nice to be the face of a perfume brand. Like, it didn't even, I thought they called me and I was like, I think you have the wrong number. I didn't pick up the first time. Like, no, we want you to be, we want you to be an ambassador for our perfume. It's a bamboo bottle. And I was like, okay, whatever. But then the more they were telling me about what their intentions were, I decided it was, kind of cool that a large business like LVMH is actually going to start taking sustainability. And those guys really need to start taking sustainability seriously. And more, because if they don't, we're just losing a whole lot of leverage. They have this capacity to make change on a level that, like, we as, ordinary people don't necessarily.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I mean, the fashion brands, they get a lot of stick, and fairly so. There's a lot of bad things that are going on with the manufacturing and the way that business is done. But at least they're trying to do something, and quite often they're getting brushed with greenwashing. Okay, you're just using someone to make your brand look good. And that may be the case in some cases, but the way I look at it is, well, at least it's a start, right? And they're thinking about it, and they're trying to sort of do better. And rather than attacking people, let's try and support them. And hopefully that campaign that you did inspires a bunch of kids to come to Bali, build bamboo structures, learn about the power of bamboo, go back and create their own thing, or potentially even LVMH might learn something themselves, and you can be the guy that goes in there and helps them think about the circular economy, or replacing these harmful leathers with something else that you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, they have to start somewhere, right? And I mean, for sure, like, I thought about the greenwashing thing going into it. I was like, do I really want to do this? Is this really what I stand for? But so much of what I do for education is all about meeting people where they are at, and going into the main issue for solving most of our problems is a lack of unity and disagreement.
I completely agree. Yeah.
People who need to speak to each other don't, because they're of differing minds. So we really need to get over ourselves, in my opinion. stop going out there and being, criticizing everybody else is not activism. It's waste. It's social waste. If someone really does something wrong and you need to call them out for it, there's a way and a place to do that that's important. But for the most part, people are they think they're making a difference by just telling everybody else how wrong they are. When really what they should be doing is focusing on how they can really take whatever leverage and whatever capacity they have as an individual and bring that into whatever institution they're in constructive and proactive ways. So when I was like, okay, this big fashion brand is going to take a chance, and instead of going with what they've always done, they're going to try something new. It's a big deal for them, and they're going to align their values. And really, for me, it's less about them greenwashing and pretending that they're really sustainable. I think they know, and I think most people know where they're at on that level. And I think it's more about that they're aligning and endorsing something that's sustainable. So they're telling all of the people that look up to them as a fashion as part of really the leader in the fashion industry, this is cool. Being sustainable, caring about the planet, doing things that are better for the world is actually important and cool, and that makes you cool by doing that, right? So I just hope that they continue and they incorporate it more into more of their brands.
That's great.
I mean, I see it a lot with people that we work with who
do care about the planet, but they're still, flying around in planes and living their, day-to-day life or whatever. And people attack them. They're like, oh, you're doing something with he or she, and they're doing this. And I'm like, well, yeah, but at least they're trying to do something positive. And like, now you're going to shoot someone down for doing something positive. It's very unproductive way of sort of doing it, and just these sort of like wars that are going on between people shouting at each other online that they don't agree with or whatever. So we'll just have a conversation and agree to disagree, but if you feel so strongly about it, go and build something yourself that's better, rather than just complaining. And it just seems to be very destructive. This culture that's going on at the moment, this division and not even listening to the other side, and that's definitely not a way of making progress.
Yeah, and there's a lot of arrogance in it, right? Where both sides think they're right and they're not having a little bit of humility and being like, okay, well, we actually all have a right to be here, no matter what you believe. Even if I don't agree with a lot of the people in the world, like me denying that their right to have an opinion is invalid is not really helpful. It doesn't help. It just makes everything worse, right? So it brings, all of the solutions for sustainability are there. They're all there, and they're simple. They're like, plant trees, compost all of your organic waste, stop purchasing so much stuff, buy less, and buy higher quality, invest in companies that are promoting, circular economies, eat less, do less, enjoy more, have more positive relationships with other people. It's really not that complicated. There's all these like, people are like, yeah, there's a competition. I hear things like there's a competition for like the CO2 machine, the machine that captures. It's just not going to work. There's a machine called a tree. It's like 1 billion years old. It's very effective at capturing CO2. We just have to figure out how to plant them in the right order intelligently and figure out how to fund that. And that will lead to all kinds of benefits for everybody, even though it might not lead to the fastest return on investment in the next, 3 years. So it's really...
But do you think it's a case of, like what you mentioned earlier, we've made immense progress, let's say the Industrial Revolution, in terms of economic progress, but then we've got to a place now and gone, oh, actually, we've made quite a lot of mistakes there, but we've kind of lost the traditional wisdom along the way of knowing how to plant a tree or knowing how to, feed yourself without going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the issue, that we're just dismissing a lot of traditional wisdoms and looking at technology as the answer without realizing we need both, maybe?
I mean, I kind of feel like at the end of the day, the big issue or the elephant in the room is really materialism. It's an overemphasis on material reality, way more important in being alive physically. Very little concern for sacrifice. There's these things that, and I'm speaking for myself too, just raised in a situation and living where materialism is kind of this paramount thing, right? And that includes, we're trying to lower the CO2 particles, right? When really what we're trying to do is we're trying to be better humans on a spiritual level. And really what all of this success and progress industrially, like that was great. It's proven our material command over the planet in a lot of ways, right? To our own detriment. But now we need to look at okay, what are the spiritual qualities and the spiritual perspectives that we can grow as individuals and as a community, and also how can we get our institutions to start to really understand that? And that's where it gets really hard to agree, right? Because it's very subjective. It's very hard. You can't, gravity is very easy to prove with mathematics. It's very hard to disagree. If you're a rational human, it's very hard to disagree with gravity. You have to, you'd be institutionalized if you disagreed with gravity. But to agree on, the nature of existence and if there's a God, and if there's meaning and purpose is takes a lot more time and energy. And that's really, I think, where we need to start focusing, because that's really what's behind wanting to learn how to plant trees again, wanting to learn how to be in community, wanting to learn how to build something as a village, right? With bamboo, one of the things I didn't mention is it's not really, it is about bamboo. We teach all the technical things about bamboo, but really what it's about is remembering what it's like to be in a group of people building something together. That's how we used to build our houses. Now we hire a contractor, we get a mortgage, we sign a bunch of things, and it's all very stiff, and you have the architect, and then that moves on to the builder, and then you have the insurance, and then you have the the interior. There's all these people, and they all have to get paid something, and then you end up in debt to another institution for that whole process. But we used to just get together, and anybody who needed a house, the community would build them a house, right? So I've created this kind of synthetic version of that where okay, none of them need a house, but that feeling of coming together as a group to learn how to build is really powerful for people outside of what they're learning technically on the bamboo side. And when you live in a bamboo house and you feel connected to nature, it's also another level of that. It's about reconnecting to who we really are as humans, right? Remembering where we came from.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And I mean, a lot of those things you mentioned do still exist here in Bali, especially kind of where you guys are further up north. And you obviously grew up in Bali, right?
I did, yeah.
And what the sort of culture that still exists here, in large part, they've sort of kept a hold of a lot of that traditional wisdom and the kind of indigenous roots, and the village aspect, the community aspect, they're still planting, the agriculture. Has Bali inspired you in terms of growing up here, and what do you think we can learn maybe from the culture here?
Oh, I mean, Bali, is part of who I am. It hasn't just inspired me; it's really made me. I owe a huge debt to Bali for everything it's given me. I spent most of my childhood running around in the village. I went to an international school, which I actually didn't like very much, and I spent most of my time dreaming for when I could get home and take my shoes off and run into the village with my 7 or 8 friends there. And I think the Balinese have really taught me the importance of presence, not always putting ambition and our desire to succeed, also remembering the importance of community. And I mean, the craftsmen who make the bamboo buildings are really perfect. They embody this principle of presence. It's kind of ironic that I'm actually charging foreigners to come and work with these Balinese carpenters to build out of bamboo. And they do it, they'll pay money to do something because it makes them feel better, right? And so these Balinese craftsmen are not making very much money, but they're living where every day they get to dedicate themselves to this very simple and often meditative process of building things. And I mean, who's having a better net impact on the planet? The Balinese carpenter who's spending his days building bamboo buildings, even if he doesn't even really know that much about sustainability, but that's just because that's what he does. Or some activist in Brooklyn who's doing whatever they're doing. You know, I wonder sometimes, you know, like even with Green School, I think it's important to honor that a lot of the times all of the people who are putting their kids there and people like me, we need to learn about sustainability way more than somebody who's, you know, living on $10 a day or $2 a day. You know, they just need to get by in life. And we're the ones consuming. We're the ones generating the myth of progress that you know, the part of humanity that's impoverished is aspiring to, right? So we need to change that whole myth. And part of that is making, you know, beautiful bamboo mansions. We don't believe that everybody should live in a beautiful bamboo mansion, but by doing that, we're making an artistic statement that helps reframe and reimagining what success and the future of humanity could look like.
Yeah, and you're exposing these, you know, this knowledge, you know, building a bamboo mansion in Bali that gets featured in the New York Times, and then people learn about bamboo, and then they, you know, kind of think about, okay, how could I do better in my life? So I guess it's that kind of, as you mentioned, inspiring people by building these epic structures, which, you know, not everybody can live in, maybe not everybody can afford, but, you know, you could come and learn about it and, you know, replace, you know, your small house wherever you're living, potentially with the bamboo structure in different ways. So I think it's more of a kind of case of creating exposure on these issues through amazing art and design, you know, which is what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's about redefining values, because those people who are buying, people who have the money to buy a bamboo, you know, luxury bamboo house like the ones Ibuku makes, they would otherwise be buying a resource-intensive villa somewhere that was made with less sustainable materials, right? You know, if you look at it from that point of view, that's their perspective, right? It's either that or this. So by choosing this, they're making a statement in their life, and they're also making a statement to everybody else that, like, this is valuable too. You know, bamboo is not just a poor man's material. It's actually something that can be elevated to a space of luxury.
Mm. And do you guys work with any other material, like within what you guys are doing? Is it specifically just bamboo that is your main focus? Or is there anything else that maybe you've seen in Bali that you think, okay, this could be quite interesting, but maybe you're just not putting the energy behind it? Is there anything else out there that you've seen?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I'm really interested in mud and lime right now. And it's been a kind of an ongoing side passion. I built a bunch of different things, incorporating bamboo with mud, incorporating bamboo with lime, hot lime. We've made some really beautiful lime floors in our bamboo buildings. And so our Dapur Naga, which is just being finished right now, is a beautiful kitchen Bamboo's been working on. And it's got this incredible floor made out of burnt brick offcuts. So like all of the broken bricks from the brick factory, we mix that with traditional hot lime, and we've made some really incredible floors. And the beauty of these floors, not just the color and the depth of it is really impressive, but it's also, it behaves a lot like concrete, but it's just a little bit softer. So when you touch it, you know, you really feel like you're coming home in a different way, that you don't get. Concrete is much more stoic, you know.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's unforgiving in a lot of ways. It's very strong and unforgiving, but these lime floors are still strong, but they just give you a little bit of extra, you know. It almost feels like it's soft when it isn't, which I really love. So there's a guy who's working with Bamboo, who's actually an Indian mud and lime builder, and he's coming and he's actually teaching our craftsmen how to build with this stuff. So and one of the contractors, you know, I found out he secretly went off and did another project for my dad with the techniques he learned. I mean, it's not really stealing because nobody told him he couldn't, and it's not, you know, it's not like mud and lime work is part of everybody's heritage, but we just forgot it. So having somebody who's brought it from India where it's still alive has been really cool.
And the mud, what do you do Rambut as well with the mud, or is that a different thing?
Rammed earth's different. I don't do a lot of. I've never done any rammed earth myself. I've seen it being done. There's a few walls in our bamboo world that use it. It's much better for drier climates. For Bali, I would, and it's much more technical too. For Bali, I think things like adobe and cob, and also you can weave. In Colombia, they have something called pajareke, which is bamboo mixed with mud. It's a little bit like what the English used to do. That's called wattle and daub, where you have like an internal wooden, or in this case, bamboo frame, and then you encase it in mud. So, and the thing about all these things is there's so many options, and they create such beautiful things. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, just like with bamboo, what it comes down to is it just requires way more human labor. And that goes back to the point that like we don't build our buildings as communities anymore. We build our buildings with professionals, and professionals are really good at making everything more expensive. So we've lost a lot of these handmade materials that add a lot to our lives, even though they're not, unfortunately, economical in a lot of places. And the fact that we still have that intersection of craft and technology in Bali is really special.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, the brick's a good one. Brick is a sustainable material, right? If you make traditional bricks,
I mean,
it's a pretty good material, right?
I think it really depends on how you do it. It's I don't know a lot about brick manufacturing other than it requires a lot of heat.
Yeah, you see the kilns, don't you?
Yeah.
Coconuts in Bali, they use the coconuts to fire the kilns and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's better than concrete. And I mean, I think the other thing is to realize that it's not like concrete's not bad. Concrete's incredible. It's a really exceptional resource that we have. What's the problem with it's just like plastic isn't bad. Gasoline isn't bad. None of it's bad. It's all great. The issue is we're overusing it, and the issue is really homogeny.
Yeah.
We need to learn how to bring diversity back into our industrialized systems. It's really important to have a variety of options for different circumstances, and to think intelligently. What are we going to use for this situation, right? If like, all we had was bamboo, so we built with bamboo because that's a stand we took. But most of the world, all they have is concrete, so they build with concrete.
Yeah, it's a standard. And yeah, I think just on an end note, it's a question, big question for you. But have you got any advice for maybe young designers or young advocates who want to build a more sustainable future sort of coming through today? Any of your sort of life lessons or the experience that you've gained, with the farm, with the bamboo, have you got any advice for maybe the young kids coming through today?
I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate to be kind of raised and brought into an environment where my interests can naturally flourish, But that being said, like, I didn't know anything when I got started. I just started. And I think a lot of the times people get stuck in the starting phase. They think that if they can't get from A to F quickly, then they can't do it. And to get from, one place to another, there's multiple steps. And the first step is really starting and giving yourself permission to start and really taking it seriously. Like, we need to become sustainable. And if we don't, the longer it takes us not to start thinking with the environment in mind, the more suffering we're going to experience, and the more suffering our children are going to experience. And the lower the possibility of our grandchildren existing at all becomes. So I'm not perfect. I'm doing all kinds of unsustainable things. I drove here in a car. We're constantly eating things. We live in a system which makes it impossible to be purists about this. But the only way we're going to get to the ideal we're all striving is to have more and more people participate in intelligent ways. And the only way to do that is to stop having a story about why you're not doing it and to just do something that you can do now. So many people get lost. Oh yeah, well, but that works for you, but in my situation, like, that's impossible. And if you believe it is impossible, it's already impossible. So, but the reality is, okay, maybe your dream of what living a sustainable life is like isn't possible for you right now, But there's only one way to get closer to that dream, and that's through perseverance and hard work and working towards it and believing that you might not be able to do everything, but you need to do something. And it's really not that complicated. There's no secret formula. There's no magical advice. You just have to get up and get started. It's like, there's no secret to working out. You just have to start doing it. And the smaller you start, the easier it is to start. So yeah, my advice is to just get started in whatever way makes sense for your context and to take that seriously.
Cool. Wise words. Orin, been great to see you. It's been amazing to talk to you. It's fascinating as always, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.